This episode of The Biggest Table is brought to you in part by Wild Goose Coffee. Since 2008, Wild Goose has sought to build better communities through coffee. And for our listeners, Wild Goose is offering a special promotion of 20% off a one-time order using the code TABLE at checkout. To learn more and to order coffee, please visit wildgoosecoffee.com. In this episode of The Biggest Table, I interview Alex Early, a pastor, author, and theology professor who enjoys cooking. We discuss Alex's journey from naivete in ministry to experiencing burnout, which led him to find solace in the kitchen. Alex explains how cooking became a therapeutic and reflective practice, helping him process his thoughts and experience God's presence in everyday moments. We also delve into the themes of food and hospitality in Scripture, the importance of slowing down to genuinely connect with others at the table, and the balance of maintaining relationships in a polarized world. The conversation wraps up with personal reflections on memorable meals and the spiritual significance of shared food experiences. I hope you enjoy the episode. Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Biggest Table. I am your host, Andrew Camp, and in this podcast, we explore the table, food, eating, and hospitality as an arena for experiencing God's love and our love for one another. And today, I'm joined by Alex Early. Dr. Alex Early is an author, pastor, and theology professor who loves to cook. Alex consistently says that all of his wealth is in his relationships, and therefore the church, kitchen, and dining table all come together toward that end. His books include The Reckless Love of God, The New Believer's Guide to the Christian Life, The Cross and Kaleidoscope, Thinking About God, and most recently, Among the Pots and Pans, a new cookbook he just released. He lives with his wife, Jana, and their 2 children in Seattle, Washington. So thanks for joining me today, Alex. It's great to connect to another pastor who loves to cook, and excited to sort of hear your story and delve into all things food and faith.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me.
So I'm going to begin here because in your cookbook, which is delightful and beautiful, in the beginning, you mentioned that you started ministry with a lot of naivete, which a lot of us go into ministry, I think, with. And so when you started ministry, what did you think or expect it to look like?
Well, I had some of it was a good and realistic vision of life and ministry and what life would look like as a pastor and serving the local congregation. And then other parts were just either unrealistic or not as rooted in scripture as they should have been. So I was a young guy, and I just kind of like anybody out of college and launching into their career, we all assume that everything is going to go up and to the right, and your star is just going to rise, and everyone's just going to love your ideas and your vision and the things that you have to say and the things that you're doing. And that just wasn't the truth. But you only know what you know when you're young and just getting out of college and starting out and chopping your way into, the world of pastoral ministry. So, yeah. So I was naive. I just thought it was going to be, I guess, easier in certain regards. And yeah.
No, for sure. I think we all expect, things to work out a different way when we start a pastoral role, whatever that role is. And, we expect people to listen to us, to do what we say.
Yeah. And you expect relationships just to come naturally and easily. Yeah. And yeah.
You expect people to agree with you, or, you say one thing and they take it the wrong way. It's not an easy terrain to navigate sometimes. And so then you also, reality sets in, and, you're experiencing, it sounds, you don't share a lot, but it sounds like you're experiencing some burnout.
Yeah.
Or, some struggles. And that led you to this, it seems like this led you to a journey towards the kitchen. Can you explain? Is that true? Is that where?
Yeah, that's kind of it. I did launch out into ministry. I planted a church successfully, and it was growing, and it did really well. And then I continued to kind of, like I said, follow a traditional trajectory of, if this is going great, then bigger equals better kind of thing. Um, so yeah, I got involved with working at Mars Hill Church. And so they recruited me to come out and lead the Ballard campus here in Seattle. And I got released from my work pretty quickly,
Wow.
which, you know, uh, I did not go on the Mars Hill podcast thing over at Christianity Today to talk about any of that stuff, but my experience was just my experience, and I was not going to fit, So,
Yeah.
so went through that, and then went through another pretty difficult experience at another church.
Wow.
Um, and so after 2 rounds of terrible church experience, I took a hiatus from ministry for about a year. And my wife and I spent a lot of time working on ourselves as individuals, as us, as a couple, and like, what are we going to do? Are we going to stay in ministry, go back into it, or are we going to just shift gears and do something else?
Hmm.
And as you know, we decided, yeah, we're going to stay in and we're going to go back in
Wow.
and steward our pain, as Frederick Buechner talks about.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so that's some of our story. But anyway, yeah, I had no idea that through cooking, cooking was a place where I found a lot of. It was already a hobby going,
Hmm.
and and it was a place where I could just think and process and just be, and
Yeah.
not just stare at a wall and plummet into depression, but like create and be working with my hands and be providing for my family while standing there over the stove, like stewing in my own mind, working through experiences, things I was learning in therapy, things I was learning from the Bible, things that just processing. So it gave me a place to process. Aside from those other very direct places of processing, like with a therapist or with my friends or a counselor or whatever.
Hmm. So what did
Yeah,
you find? Yeah. No, I appreciate that, and I appreciate you sharing a little of
sure,
your journey and the
sure.
hurts.
Yeah,
Yeah, we all got them. And church. Yeah. Um, the church hurt from a pastor is is real and different.
yeah,
And having
yeah,
experienced it myself, it's not something I would wish on anybody.
for sure.
But God gives us graces, and food became a place for you where you were
Hmm.
able to be in your hands. And so, what, like, obviously therapy's great, but what did food provide and cooking that was different than, say, these other avenues?
Yeah, like I was saying, like I tend to pick meals to cook that end up taking a lot of time because it's a place for me to think.
Hmm.
And it's a place for me to also be with people. So
Yeah.
sometimes, my wife and kids are jumping in and helping out, or a friend or two are over and they're helping out. And so that's a great way to spend. But oftentimes it was a place for me to, like, again, like it was just enough to get my mind off of the pain
Right.
and do something else and shift
Yeah.
gears and live in another headspace. And at the same time, it wasn't so complex and so complicated that I couldn't both dice carrots and think about life too.
Hmm.
So again, it was something to do with my hands while I work through things. And I think a lot of people tend to be like that. It's one thing to sit in a chair and be deeply contemplative in that regard, and I do that for sure, but
Right.
I can't do that all day every day. It's like, so this was able to give me a fun and creative outlet
Yeah.
uh, as I worked through life with God and people and
Hmm.
the rest. Yeah.
No, as you worked through it, what through cooking, did you begin to notice different aspects of God that you didn't notice other places?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, the and what I stumbled upon is something I like mentioned in the book is like I simply stumbled into spaces that other saints long before me have stumbled into, whether it's Brother Lawrence working and stirring and making a cake in the kitchen, where he talks
Right.
about that like practice of the presence of God, or Saint Saint Pascal, or um, Teresa of Avila, and her famous line about God walks among the pots and pans. Like, uh, I I simply found myself in a place that the kitchen is just as holy as anywhere else,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
because we don't leave God at the communion table on Sunday, but God is with us in our everyday, in our ordinary, mundane moments of life. And I started noticing it's not really about getting him to come join me somewhere.
Mm.
It's more like me waking up and joining him right now.
Yeah.
Like, he never leaves me. So that I started to discover that theological concept became a reality first for me, really, in the kitchen.
Huh. So
Yeah,
the idea that God is just present, that you're waking up to the presence of God each and every day, and that
that's it.
through the
Like,
bounty of creation and
uh-huh.
um, the joy
Yeah,
of transforming ingredients.
that's it. And like creating and then providing for my family and going, gosh, I am created and I am
Right.
provided for. And like these very obvious things that are right there at the very beginning of the Bible. But,
Yeah,
there's so many of these things that you don't learn until you learn them. And for
for
me,
sure.
a little later in life.
No, I hear that. No, and because you mentioned too that we as Christians and especially pastors, we steward in the world of words.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
preaching. We're reading the word. We're
Mm,
talking to people, and
yes.
there's something about the embodied activity of cooking and eating that I think, for you, it sounds like it took some stuff from the head down
Mm-hmm.
deeper into the heart.
Mm-hmm. That's it. It gave time and space to process while moving my hands,
Yeah.
while interacting with people at the grocery store, while thinking through what this might taste like or what that might look like and who might enjoy this or that. Like, again, it gave me space to kind of integrate creative work, providing work,
Yeah.
um, and a space to process going through some hard stuff. Or maybe it wasn't necessarily hard stuff, but at the same time I was like finishing my doctoral work, and like so I was able to like process like stuff on the Trinity and all, like, at the same, so it gives you just a place to like work through
Right.
things,
Yeah. Uh-huh. That,
Yeah.
no, that's very cool. Like, it's slightly different for me, as my experience in the kitchen, it's more of a space to just get out of my head. Like, I
Yeah.
just, like, I stop thinking, um,
Hmm.
and it's a release that way of,
Nowadays I do find it more like that, but during
okay.
a very difficult season of
Yeah.
life I found it to be kind of cathartic in one way. But I'm more like that now. It's like it's basically like my Sabbath all the time now. It's like
Right.
I'm just here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
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 And so how does it then translate with your family? Like how old are your kids first? Like, cuz
Kids are 14 and 13, almost 15. So
okay.
yeah.
So you have
Yeah.
teenagers in the house. So what does cooking look like with them and teenage life?
Yep. um, let's see. Our son is just learning to finally like stop picking through everything, and he's like his palate's finally broadening, and he's asking for other things. And you're like, "All
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
finally."
Yep.
Chicken fingers and fries are, boys are gonna be boys, I guess. But anyway, so his palate's broadening. Our daughter will eat anything under the
Okay.
sun, and so she's always the adventurous one. Um, and so, but as far as like cooking with them, it's something where I I will rope them in to help me out in the kitchen, but I intentionally only grab them for like 5 minutes at a time. Hey, will
Huh.
you dice this onion for me? Hey, will you, whatever, boil some water on the stove, whatever we're doing.
Right.
And but I only use them for about 5 minutes because they're always coming and going. They got stuff to
Yeah.
do. It's just enough to slow down and touch base with them. And as they're doing something, it gives us just another extra couple of minutes together that are
Hmm.
ordinary, but those are not ordinary moments. Those are holy moments, because they're my kids. And so,
Yeah.
so that's kind of what it looks like. We don't spend hours and hours in the kitchen together cooking, but we do. I get them in there just enough, or like tonight, I'll probably make pizzas tonight for everybody. And so like,
Right.
I'll have them top all their pizzas or whatever, that kind of thing.
For sure. No,
Yeah.
I love that thought of just bringing them in for 5 minutes to do one or two tasks versus like, hey, do you want to help me make dinner? Which, my girls are 8 and 6. And so like they want to help, but they have that 5-minute attention span as well.
Totally. So take and bake cookies are good for,
Yeah.
like, okay, well, you can grease a cookie sheet and you
Right.
can preheat
Yeah.
the oven and you can listen to the timer and
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
No, what was it? A couple weekends ago, my girls asked for some homemade raviolis that I'd made a year ago. And so like, they're like, can we help, Daddy? And I'm like, okay, this is rolling out pasta. It's like, making
Yeah.
raviolis isn't. And so like they would help for a little bit and I would get frustrated. And so I think I love your idea of like, hey, help do this task for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
That's, yeah.
And kind of rope them back in as you roll out the pastas and you start, the ragu and all the other stuff. Like, yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, I love that. And so listeners, I hope you take that advice as you're seeking to figure out how to bring your kids into cooking. Like grab them for, what's a simple task they can do and then release them back into their childhood wiles.
There you go. And like one thing I'm going to try this year, like our daughter, when she turns 15, we usually go to a cabin up in the San Juans and we'll stay there for like 2 or 3 days. And it's just this remote, most amazing place.
Wow.
And I'll usually spend like half of the day making Regina Schrambling's lasagna from New York Times. And it's absolutely the most incredible thing. But it takes all day. It's a full-on commitment. And I might get our daughter to roll with me through the whole cook this time.
Nice.
And it's like, all right, commit with me. We'll start at this time and we'll be done by this time. But but she'll be 15, so she can maybe hang a little longer.
No, she can. Yeah. And so what is it, about Regina Chambly's lasagna that, like your face lights up, like there's something about this lasagna that speaks to your soul, Alex. So like what?
Absolutely incredible, man. So the technique is pretty wild. And if you had somebody like a Kenji Lopez food lab guy explain the chemical compounds of how things break down, it would make all kinds of sense, I guess, to scientific listeners. But the big idea is you make meatballs that are like out of chuck and pork and garlic and parsley and all the stuff. You make meatballs, you flour them, you brown them. They go into the marinara sauce for about an hour, and then you pull them back out, chop them back up, back into the marinara sauce. And so anyway, there's a couple of like little techniques. Like, I had one of my like science chef buddies explain all this stuff to me.
Right.
And when he did, it made sense. But since then I forgot it. So it's absolutely just the most incredible lasagna anybody could ever have. So it's just unbelievable. It takes about 4 hours.
Are you making your own pasta with it, or is it you're using pre-made lasagna?
This year I will be.
Okay.
Yeah. This year I will be.
Okay. I'll have to look up that recipe and maybe I'll throw it in the show notes for our listeners too, and because a good lasagna,
and it makes a lot. So just prepare yourself.
Okay. Homemade ricotta with it, or you.
Oh yeah, we'll do it all, man.
You'll do it all, man.
Yeah, we'll do it all.
All right. I think
it's her birthday, so we'll go all out for that one.
For sure.
Yeah.
When you make this lasagna, what wine are you drinking?
Oh man, probably a Chianti. Yeah.
Nice.
Probably. I don't know. I was thinking about it yesterday, actually.
Okay.
So I don't know. Last night I was actually thinking about like after dinner, like 6 grapes, just a port. But we'll see.
There you go. Nice. Yeah. I'm partial. I like a good Barolo.
Oh yeah, man.
Uh,
Me
yeah.
too. Mhm.
Yeah. No, but a good Italian wine.
Mhm.
Yeah. There's some great
Yeah.
ones from San Marzano with like, where they grow the tomatoes. And so like sometimes you get that tomatoey flavor there that you're like, okay, I can taste the vines,
Uh-huh.
and so I haven't fooled around with it yet, but I'm like, okay, I need to get a good San Marzano wine and get some tomatoes and try to see,
Oh
what's
man,
going on there.
might pick one up tonight to go with our pizza. Now that you're saying that, that sounds really good.
Yeah, I know we're getting off, talking about food and just
Yeah.
getting those meals that light
Yep.
up.
Yep.
Um, but that's
Yep.
the beauty of the kitchen is, you have these memories, that we create, and I'm sure your kids will remember that lasagna and carry it with them. Um,
Yeah.
and just that memory of being there.
Yes, that's
To
it. That's what it does. That's what the kitchen does. I mean, yeah. I mean, there's a reason why they say like, "Oh, this was made with love." Like that's not like a make believe ingredient.
No,
Like that is why you remember what you remember with your mom or your dad or your grandparents or an aunt or an uncle or whatever. Like you just remember certain things like they were made with love. And it doesn't
yeah,
necessarily mean you're eating at a Michelin star restaurant.
no,
It's do you feel loved and welcomed? Is it a place of hospitality? Are
yeah,
you seen and heard in that space? And it's like, man, I felt something there.
right, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's a great quote. I know, MFK Fisher. I don't know if you're familiar with her writings,
Mm-hmm.
but she has this great quote of like people would ask her why she's writing about food when there's so much brokenness and pain, and she's writing during World War II, and she mentions like, hey, when I write about food, I'm actually writing about love and
Mm-hmm.
belonging and brokenness, and like
Yeah.
at the end of
That's
it,
it.
she said like, there's more than communion of bodies when we come together.
Mhm.
And I think that's what you're alluding to.
That's it. That's completely it. Yeah. And we all know that. Like
Yeah,
we all know that. Everybody hears that by her and goes, "Yeah, that's it."
that's it. Yeah, that's why we do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yet we also then have bad food habits, or we're a culture of, as Michael Pollan says in Omnivore's Dilemma, we're autonomous eaters eating alone in our fast food in our cars.
Oh, I
Um,
know.
and so
Yes.
we're fighting also this culture where we know on the one hand, this table and food is this place of belonging. Yet we also have the American way of eating we don't have a culture of eating, it seems, at times. Say
Mhm.
like the France or even
Right.
Asian cultures have. And so like as you've thought about the American food habits, like
Mhm.
what are you hoping for? And then how does that then translate to how you think about ministry if it does?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I mean, food is more than fuel,
Right.
and in our very busy, uh, hurried North American, Western, autonomous, individualistic culture where it's we act like machines 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
We're glued to our phones, we're glued to a desk, we're glued to work constantly. Like I heard someone say this week, like you used to leave work, but now when you pick up your phone, work just comes with you everywhere you
Mm,
go. And like, so we live like machines, so we treat our bodies like machines. And therefore, yeah, food is just a means to an end so I can keep working and getting toward the next thing on my calendar. And food is meant for far more than fuel.
right.
And so, yeah, the average American sitting in their car at a fast food thing, scarfing this down to the next thing. Uh, and I mean, I don't want to be like judgy of people like eating fast food or whatever going. Like, I
No.
understand people are
Yeah.
bad places to be. But if that's the norm, it's worth challenging and asking the question like, am I just being a machine in this world? Is there another way that I could structure and reorder my life to where I actually have a little more margin to enjoy a couple of things?
Hmm.
And I fear that most or many people think that later on in life we'll get around to like slowing down and enjoying the table and we'll slow down and we'll enjoy like meals with family later. It's like, yeah, but they're growing up in your house right now.
Right.
Or they're, that later might not come. So
No.
Yeah. So when I think about food is more than fuel, it's the ground and the place that brings people actually together. Like no one wants to eat alone. That's why when you see someone eating alone, they're staring at their phone.
Right.
Like they just can't sit there and be alone. Like
Mm-hmm.
it bothers people to be alone
Right.
while eating for some reason.
Yeah.
And so it's designed to bring us together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And food runs throughout scripture. Like, and what's beautiful about your book is you paint that picture. You help us, and you help the reader see that theme running through scripture. And
Mhm.
um I think as soon as you start noticing that food plays a prominent role, you see food everywhere in scripture. At
Yeah.
least that's how I see it now. Like everything comes back to food. But um
Mhm.
when did you start noticing like the role of food in scripture? What was that for you?
I started noticing that like right when I had planted our church. It's called Four Corners Church. I planted our church and I noticed right out of the gate that nothing was ever done in the work of a pastor.
Yeah.
Like people aren't finished, sermons aren't finished. I'm definitely never finished. Like, so because nothing is ever finished, I needed to find some kind of work that I can finish, that I can complete. And so
Right.
that's why I run every day. Like,
Hmm.
I can run a 5K every day. I know when I'm done.
Yeah.
Like, that kind of stuff. Like, I need tasks that I know are finished.
Hmm.
Um, and cooking began to give me something I could do every day and complete a task and go, okay, this is done, you
Right.
know? Um, so I began learning that right out of the gate. My friend John at our church pointed that out to me and helped me
Hmm.
see, like, you need to be able to finish some work, man. And you need some kind of creative outlet with your hands. And so for me, it was like, well, I enjoy painting, but when I paint, like I'm alone. Or I could play music, like I can play music, I
Yeah.
can be in a band or whatever, and like I can do that whole thing. And like, but again, that takes me away from my family. And so cooking became a place
Oh,
where I don't leave my family. I
no.
can complete my work, and lo and behold, Jesus is here too.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right. Yeah.
So all of that began. Yeah. So that's kind of where, like, kind of right out of the gate with
Mm-hmm.
launching into church planting and pastoral ministry.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then, your theme of scripture, like how did scripture then begin to inform all of this for you?
Oh, yeah. Um, I think I planted our church in a bar.
Okay.
So I
Nice.
had a job as a bar back, and it was one of the ways I was putting my way through seminary,
Mm-hmm.
and I was bar back, substitute teacher, and a day laborer. And so that's how I paid for seminary.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, food was right there in the bar
Right.
every day. And so I saw like this, I was watching it every day, being a place, not in a church, but a bar, watching. This is where people, it's a public house, it's where people come and connect.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw that constantly. But then when I really started seeing it like in the Bible, I remember reading a book by Tim Chalice
Okay.
called like Meals with Jesus or something like
Oh
that.
yeah. Tim Chester, right?
Tim Chester, that's it.
Yeah.
Chester, whatever.
Yeah. No, I
It was
understand.
so long ago now.
Yep. Yeah. No.
It was really cool, and it was like basically walking through the Gospel of Luke,
Yeah.
and showing that line that says something like Jesus was always on his way to a meal, at a meal, or heading away from a meal, or whatever.
Yeah.
Like I started to see it there. I remember that marked me like, oh, that is really cool.
Yeah.
And then I started seeing it everywhere.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, it's similar for me where I was reading Eugene Peterson, Living the Resurrection. And, he has a quote of like, the gospel writers are most fond of telling Jesus, stories about Jesus at meals or around the table. And I'm like,
Yeah,
like, explosion.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. It's kind of mind blowing, like that really was. They were so concerned with the table because the table was such a holy place, and a social signal.
Right. Yeah,
That piqued their interest. Like, you
it did.
can't eat with these guys. You eat with people that look like us, think like us, talk like us, vote like us, believe like these guys are not clean. Like that, So it was
Right.
yeah.
So how has Jesus's meal practices then informed you personally, but then also as you think, as a pastor helping shepherd other people? Um,
Mm,
what is that? How has Jesus challenged you?
um, I had a conversation about this week.
Hmm.
Probably 2 days ago. Um, well, following Jesus is going to get you heat from the right and the left.
Yeah.
There are gonna be moments where my extremely conservative friends are gonna have a really hard time with my uh very much so not conservative friends that I eat with and hang out with and have a great time with and really like being around.
Mm-hmm.
My conservative friends can look at that and be like, "What's wrong with you, Alex? Like,
Yeah.
is there something wrong with your character?" At the same time, my extremely liberal friends or unbelieving friends or whatever over here on this side have a hard time. Like, you hang out with people that like believe X, Y, and Z. It's like, yes. And so I feel like Jesus's model is going to upset people on either end of the spectrum,
Hmm.
because he's not here to pander to anybody, whether it's conservative or irreligious or whatever. Like, so in following him, and even in my own like daily life or pastoral ministry, you're going to look a little odd
Hmm.
in the sense of, if you're a pastor and you're hanging out with this kind of crowd, suddenly it's like, are you a very good pastor? Do you know what you're doing? Like, you know? Um, so yeah, that's kind of how that
Oh,
stands out to me with Jesus and dining with certain crowds.
yeah. And holding that tension of,
Yeah,
it's not either or. Like we're so fixated on either
totally.
or thinking, whether, it's in the church, out of the church, like you're
Yeah,
either this or that. But I think
yeah,
Jesus invites us to this both and.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Like, there's a problem for Christ. Like, I deeply feel like I have a deep conviction. If I just go through my phone or my calendar and all of my appointments are all people who look like me and think like me and believe like me and talk like me, and what, there's a problem.
mm,
Like, I'm I'm called to be the salt of the earth. I'm
yeah.
called to be in the world, not of it, but in it. And
Hmm.
like, there's these, you know, moments where if you went through Jesus's phone and looked at his friends, you'd be like, "You're friends with that girl?"
Yeah.
Like, that's right. And so
Hmm.
there's some of like that where I find that still deeply convicting, of going,
Mm,
church can become a place for pastors, especially, to like somehow recluse and live in like this little plastic bubble and facilitate religious community for everybody else while they don't actually experience it. And then they tell everybody else, go reach your friends with the gospel, but they don't actually have any unbelieving friends because they're too busy managing sheep all the time. And
right.
I don't know. I mean, you read through the New Testament and Paul's saying like one of the qualifications of an elder in the church is to be well thought of by outsiders.
Hmm.
It's like, what do you think that means?
Yeah.
People that don't love Jesus still speak well of you because of the way you live. Like, that's a qualification. That's a big, like, that's a big deal,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway, so when I see Jesus at the table, he does not make sure everybody is super kosher before he'll break bread with them
Hmm.
and enter into friendship with them,
Right.
you know? So, yeah, that speaks to me profoundly, like, in how I'm supposed to see the table and my life.
Hmm. And so how do you for listeners, we all say yes to this, but the practice gets hard. Or,
Yeah.
and so what would you, how could you encourage listeners and even me,
Yeah.
to then, take this from head to heart?
One is, remember, for me, it's like when I have certain friends over that say certain things that, like, oh gosh, my kids are in the room, I can't believe you just said that. But like, this is where Christians tend to cringe up. Like, see, that's the thing right there. I don't want that guy using that word around my kids, or that woman saying whatever. It's like, right. But people that don't know Jesus are going to talk like they don't know Jesus.
Yeah.
Surprise.
Surprise. That's a good, yes.
And sometimes a guy that does know Jesus also talks like he doesn't know Jesus. So like, there's a part of me where it's like just keeping a realistic vision of, yeah, people are going to be unbelievers. And I shouldn't expect them to have the same kind of standards or morals or the way we carry ourselves in our home. But also, that's not saying, let everything go and who cares and all rules are off. But I think it's just a matter of going, there are so many people that have either deconstructed or left the faith or have never even entertained the idea of faith because they are given all of these prerequisites, not for Jesus, but just to come into your house. And it's like that some of that needs to be challenged and questioned.
Right.
You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. Yeah.
And going like, well, Jesus didn't make people do X, Y, and Z before he would have a meal with them.
Yeah.
But I will.
Right.
Or I'm tempted to, or I'm like, oh man, I start asking all these questions that Jesus wasn't even remotely worried about.
Right.
Because again, like, so what if like these people are talking about something like this? You can change the subject if it's obviously way out of bounds or something. And
yeah,
guys, still lead your home. But at the same time, when that friend leaves the house, you can talk to your children or your wife about those conversations and go, yeah, see how we handled that. Like,
yeah.
You can still keep applying the gospel and go, yeah, that's where we're different. And you just explain that. And so that's kind of how we've rolled.
Yeah.
With our kids.
No, I love that idea.
Training our kids to go out into the world. And I don't want my kids to be bulldozed day one in UW because suddenly they've been in this like so sheltered environment that they've never had their ideas challenged or tested. And suddenly they're blown out of the water on day one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When they leave the house.
No, for sure.
It's a teaching moment and a guiding moment to go, did you hear my buddy when he said blank and how I was showing him that, like,
yeah,
that's discipleship in the home.
No. Yeah. And it's learning how to have conversations, because even when we invite Christians over, they can say some things that make me cringe, like,
Yes.
And especially when they're non-believers, you get non-believers and Christians together and somebody's going to say something that is offensive.
Yeah. Or just wrong.
Yeah.
Or just obnoxious or just like, man, that's so easy for you to say when you're in a room of 9 out of 10 of you are Christians. You got that unbeliever over here. And it's like, that's a weird,
Right. Yeah. No, but it's learning how to have those conversations in such a deeply polarized society, and that's what the table is supposed to do. It's supposed to bring the misfits together. It's supposed to allow us to see the humanity in another, and recognize their humanity before the judgment,
that's exactly it. Yeah.
Or it's, Jesus touching the leper before cleansing him, yeah. So much there because I think of Miroslav Volf and his idea of the will to embrace begins with any preconceived notion of who they are. Like you embrace them and then, first.
Yep.
And so that's the power of the table.
Yeah, that's completely it. That's the power of the table, is we don't have to see eye to eye on everything before we can sit down and have a meal.
Mm-hmm.
And 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 it's okay to not agree on things.
Right.
Like, if we can treat each other lovingly and respectfully and kindly, then I'm not going to vote you out of my life
Yeah.
because you believe things that I don't believe.
Mm-hmm.
I can still maintain a friendship with you, even though we see the world very differently,
Right.
And yeah, our friendship would probably grow into something far deeper if we saw and agreed on more essential issues. But to suddenly just be like, you're out of my life and I have nothing to do with you people that act like that and you people that think that way, this othering stuff, I just don't have time for it anymore. Yeah,
No.
I just don't have time for it. It's like, I don't
Eh,
want to live a life like that.
Yeah. No. When you said I don't have time, it's um, what immediately thought of is like, yes, we want to make space for, that welcoming presence. And that actually takes way more time, you
Yeah.
know, and it's a way harder work than the
Yeah.
othering,
It's,
and so
yeah, it's way harder.
it
It's
is.
definitely way harder. It costs time, it costs money. And like, that's something too, like, we like the idea of hospitality. Um, but oftentimes we think hospitality equals entertainment,
Mm-hmm.
and hospitality is not just about come over and let me wow you with some meal or some amazing house or whatever. Like,
Right.
there's nothing wrong with cooking great meals or having beautiful homes. The idea, though, is hospitality has to do with more with communicating that someone really belongs here.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not here to perform for you.
No.
Um, but hospitality helps people feel seen, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and that takes time, because once they feel seen and loved, they might open up and share hard things that are going on in their lives. And suddenly, like, whoa,
Yeah.
we're not just eating lasagna. We're suddenly like, we're talking about heavy things. And as
Yeah.
people open up, like, that's something that we have to be aware of if we're becoming people of hospitality, is going, yeah, it's going to cost time, money, emotions, following up. It's going to caring.
Yeah.
Yeah, nature of love costs.
For sure. Yeah.
What love is. And yeah, at the same time, what else is there to do?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. No, for sure. And that's, and the beauty of hospitality is that you can connect over Kraft mac and cheese, or you can,
Totally.
connect over this beautiful lasagna that takes all day to make. Like,
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
and there's a
Exactly.
place for both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, and that's where holding that tension, you know, um,
Mm-hmm.
continues to, I continue to wrestle with,
Yeah.
uh, and so like you've written this cookbook's out in the world, like not
Yeah.
many pastors write cookbooks, and so like as you were writing this, you are, I'm guessing, nobody writes a book without a vision for what the book could be. Like
Yeah.
what's your hope and prayer for this
Mm.
book?
Um, the big idea of really my life is I'm trying to show up to my actual life. And so the way we talk about it in our family and around our church is, I want to be faithfully present
Hmm.
to God, to myself, and to other people. I want to be present. And so when I was writing this book, that's what I'm trying to communicate page after page, is like, show up.
Okay.
On your phone,
Yeah.
stop working, but stop, just slow down and like actually show up to the one life you've been given to live, and respond to God and the gospel in it.
Hmm.
We're inviting people in. Like, again, like, I'm deeply concerned about how fast we run and how outpaced we just, the pace of our lives are just, it's too much.
Yeah.
And so we're burning out. we're addicted to all kinds of anxiety meds and sleep medication now, and on and on. It's like we run ourselves like machines. And I'm going, God's already provided the solution
Yeah.
first in himself, and then you slow down in his presence. And so that's what I'm trying to do through the art of cooking and hospitality. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be this like, okay, so now if I'm going to slow down, I need to go be like a monk, like in a cave somewhere. It's like, no, just slow down enough to have a meal with your family or your friends. That's what
Yeah.
I'm saying.
Yeah.
Just slow down like that and do the thing that you kind of really want to be doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know? When you wish, do that.
Yeah. No, it's
And
like you, yeah. No, it's like you said early, and when you were learning, this cooking is you were beginning to see God's presence everywhere, and so much of the spiritual life, I think, is just it's not adding more. It's actually how can we be present to what God is already
That's
up
right.
to, and I think we have to eat, and
Mhm.
so how can God become a present factor in that moment?
Yes.
Um, and that's the beauty of food is we have to do it. So how can we bring God into this mix when he's already provided it? So like like you said,
Yes. And he's already there. It's
yeah,
wake up to the fact that he is already there.
yeah,
That's
hmm, yeah, and
yeah.
recognizing God in the beauty of the produce and the beauty of
Yeah.
like the bounty of produce, like
Yeah. Or the fact that, you know, just about any of us can walk into a grocery store today and look over the sea of produce, and you can buy anything you want in sight.
yeah,
I was standing at this uh, this water this thing full of like shrimp and crabs and oysters and whatever at the
right,
grocery like last weekend with my friends Jesse and Nick, and we're just standing there, and that's what we were talking about. We were looking at everything across the grocery, and it's like, guys, isn't this crazy?
right,
We can just buy anything we want in here.
yeah,
You just walk over and pay, like you can buy an orange, you can buy, like we were just like looking at everything going, man. And I know this sounds so silly because like, well, duh, you've been going to the grocery store for 44 years, Alex.
right,
But it's like, yeah, I've been going to a grocery store for 44 years.
hmm,
We are overwhelmingly blessed.
yeah,
We've been given so much. We ought to be the most grateful people. This ought to cultivate an incredible amount of gratitude. It's like, well, no, I mean, I don't have all the money in the world and I can't do everything in the world. But oh my gosh, if you've got with these things, we'll be content, like Paul talks about,
yeah, for
like,
sure, yes, yeah,
like we've got plenty to be content over.
hmm, which then should help us move out into the world to
Yeah.
feed the hungry, to care for the poor, like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think the table also then is a motivating missional act, that if we can't see the hungry, both literally and spiritually, like I think the tables we need to do a little course correction
Yeah, there you go.
as
Mm-hmm.
well.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah,
So you see it as a place of mission, a place of communion, like, yeah, based on who's there, you know, but God is always in the middle,
yeah, hmm,
you know.
yeah, yeah. We don't need to ever invite God's presence. Um,
No,
I
he's
think
here.
He's here. I
Yeah.
think yeah, it's opening our eyes. Um, looking up from a screen long
Mm-hmm.
enough to see it. Um,
Yes.
being okay with young kids causing ruckus at the table.
Yeah, that's just part of it.
Yeah.
And they don't take away. Like that's the thing. They're not taking away from anything,
No.
even though they're loud or whatever, or wanting to talk about some whatever thing that you really don't care about. It's
Right.
like they're not actually taking away from anything.
Mm-mm. No.
Especially God.
Yeah. Yeah. But if they can, if they see that the table is a place where they can be themselves,
Yeah.
maybe, when my girls are grown, they won't try to clean up their act, before God, but can just let loose and have fun.
Show up as you are.
Show
Yeah.
up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Love it. Love that beauty of the table. The simple yet profound. Like it's so simple, but yet it is a challenge. That's not always easy.
No, it's not. It's more of it's a, like you said, it's all a labor of love. Yes.
Yeah.
Like that's the point of the table. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, and not every meal is going to be this profound spiritual experience.
No, not at all. And that's okay too.
Yeah.
Not every meal is, wow, I feel like we just encountered God here.
Right.
Like that, not every meal is intended to be that way, but I do think more often than not, we could slow down just a little bit,
Yeah.
just to recognize we're with each other,
Hmm. Yeah.
and it's just special to be together. And this
Yep.
is special that God gave us this food.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there'll also be times where you try a recipe and you're like, well, that was garbage. We're going to not do that ever again.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That happens. Or, yeah. One of my friends one time, he brews beer, back in Georgia. And, he said, he made one batch of beer that I liked, whatever it was. And I was like, oh, did you guys make any more of that? And he was like, you liked that? I was like, yeah. And he's like, yeah, that was a single edition. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So every once in a while, something will come up and I'm like, oh, that was a single edition.
Yep. 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 Yeah.
That was one time. Yeah.
No. But on the other end, do you have a favorite recipe in the book? Like if you were going to say, like, if you cook one recipe, cook this one. What's that
Yeah.
recipe?
The shrimp tacos.
The shrimp tacos. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. What about the shrimp tacos? It's
The story that goes with them is great.
okay.
But so my friend John Snell and I, and our friend Grandy Streets, we worked on these tacos for about 3 years, 3.5 years, working on them, trying to figure out what else goes in this marinade and so on. So we spent a lot of time working on these tacos, just goofing off.
Fun.
And one day when we thought we had just about nailed it, you fry a tortilla, you've got your shrimp that's marinated, you make a slaw, you make the sour cream, you make this guacamole, we've got all this stuff going. We make the taco, it's amazing. And then John's daughter, Riley, walked downstairs. She was about 9 years old. We call her Rue. Rue walked in and said, hey, Rue, try one of these tacos. She tried it and she goes, you know what this needs? I'm like, what? And she goes, this needs like red pepper jelly on the base. We're like, oh, that's interesting. So we got it, we made it, and it's absolutely unbelievable.
So a 9-year-old girl, revolutionized your shrimp taco.
Gave us the thing we needed. And you're like, oh my gosh. And it's so good.
Okay.
Because it really does do the salt, fat, acid, heat thing. And she added what was missing right there. It was pretty funny. So that's cool. Probably my favorite thing in that book.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. No, I'll have to, yeah.
A lot of great stuff in there.
No, there is. And it's all approachable. You're not dealing with this esoteric chef.
No.
I love the chef driven cookbooks from, but you also need a cookbook that you can do every day.
Yeah. That's all this is.
Yeah.
Stuff anybody can do. Yeah.
Nice. Awesome. There's a question as we begin to wrap up that I'd love to ask all my guests. And so it's this: what is the story you want the church to tell?
What's the story I want the church to tell? Gosh, I think the church, that's so big. That's almost too big for me. But the story our church is telling, I can say it that way.
That's fair. Yeah.
Our church is simply responding to God and the gospel through living lives that are faithfully present to God and ourselves and each other. So what is the church? The church is a collection of people who have responded to God and the gospel. We've assembled around the person and the work of Jesus by the Spirit, right?
Yep.
That's what a church is. So it's respond to that and invite people into life with God. I think that's it. We're to be a hospitable place of invitation to life with God.
Nice.
Yeah.
Love it. Love it. No, thank you. I appreciate this. And it's been a fun conversation. So some fun questions to wrap up, um, centered around food. And so what's one food you refuse to eat?
Sweet potatoes.
Ah,
Yeah. My
okay.
wife made our first year of marriage her favorite thing to eat, and the only thing she knew how to make was sweet potatoes. So, sweet potatoes. We
Okay.
had a lot of sweet potatoes, and now I hate them.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. Then on the other end of the spectrum, what's one of the best things you've ever eaten?
Oh man. One time I sat with my granddad by a pond when I was a kid, and we were fishing, and we ate tomato sandwiches in the sun, and it was the greatest meal of my life.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love it. That's cool.
That's it.
It's-
Salt, pepper, mayo.
with your
White
grandpa.
with my granddad. That was the greatest. Yeah.
That's cool. What a special memory.
Yep.
And then finally, there's a conversation among chefs about last meals, as in if you knew you had only one meal left to enjoy, what would it be? And so for Alex, if you knew you only had one last meal, what might be on your table?
Oh, wow. Gosh, that's a hard one. That puts me in a strange head place. Like
Okay.
coming off sabbatical and being in this place of contemplation. I'm
Yeah.
tempted to just say like bread and wine.
Fair enough. Yeah.
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 Probably bread and wine.
Nice. Yeah. No, it's an interesting question. And it's curious
Yeah.
what always people say, but
Maybe a slice of maybe some Gruyere.
okay. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with bread, wine, and cheese, you know?
Maybe a little cheese in there too.
Yeah. Yes.
I'll be thinking about that today, actually.
It's morbid, but I think it speaks to what we crave. And I think, you know,
Mm.
this was back 2009, probably. There was actually a cookbook that came out of like, they asked the greatest chefs like Gordon Ramsay,
Sure.
others of what their last meal would be. And a lot of them all, who have access to every ingredient possible, all of them wanted their mom's home cooking.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so,
yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, it would be probably a tomato sandwich then. Yeah, like we were saying a minute ago, like my granddad, like something like that. Maybe that's it. That's interesting.
Yeah. Well, Alex, I really appreciate this. It's been a joy to connect, to hear of your story, your heart, your passion, not only for Jesus, but for the table and practicing Jesus's table habits. And so if people are curious, is there a place they can follow you or obviously buy the cookbook?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, at Alex Early or at Alex Early Food is the food account. And then paearly.com. And then the book's available everywhere, through the publisher or Amazon, wherever. Barnes and Noble, it's everywhere.
Yeah. So no, do pick up the book, follow Alex. Gathering around the table in this season of life is so important. And so I hope you as listeners enjoy this and begin to start practicing this and even try some new recipes from Alex. And so if you've enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing, leaving a review, or sharing it with others. Thanks for joining us on this episode of The Biggest Table, where we explore what it means to be transformed by God's love around the table and through food. Until next time, bye.